A virus spreading, planes grounded, trade stalling, and even sporting events cancelled. Inevitably, markets are tumbling, but the sell-off has turned into the worst week since the global financial crisis more than a decade ago. Smiles for the starting bell in New York, but share prices slumped seconds later. A week ago, they were at an all-time high.
What's the stock?
And in London, the 100 biggest companies are worth a staggering £210 billion less than they were just 7 days ago.
How many are you trying to sell?
I'd say this is probably the most dramatic week I've seen since my time here in the markets.
That bad?
Yeah.
What trading floors in London say they're witnessing is worldwide contagion.
Well, we've really seen investor panic grip into markets across the world. We've seen the biggest points drop in the Dow in its history. We've seen $3 trillion wiped off global markets within a week. And it's not just the equity markets. This is extended into other markets as well. We've seen a major slump in the oil markets. It's now in correction territory.
Correction territory. Trader talk for a drop of 10%. And she's talking about oil, one of the world's most in-demand commodities. The last time markets behaved like this, the 2008 financial crisis.
This is another black swan event, something that no one could have predicted, and that's why we're seeing a lot of panic in the markets, and the risk is that that does extend into a recession.
And there are no reassuring words coming from global institutions.
We are likely to downgrade our growth projections for the world.
In Geneva, he should be setting up, not stripping down. But the motor show has been cancelled. 600,000 visitors and hundreds of car manufacturers told, stay at home. Fear, as much as the effects of the virus, is stalling trade and tourism and sending the markets into retreat. There's only so far stocks and shares can slide before the question gets asked, do governments and central banks need to kick in and take some action? In the US, there's already speculation that the Federal Reserve might be getting ready to cut interest rates. Possible pressure then for the Bank of England to follow suit. But interest rates are already very low. So low, there's not much further for them to go. So how much of an effect will any more cuts actually have?
Rates are zero or negative in some countries, so they don't have much room for maneuver. Yet markets expect central banks to come out, cut rates and reassure investors that everything is fine. But the kind of policy that will be more helpful and more effective in this situation is fiscal policy, more targeted measures to help those companies, those areas that are mostly affected.
Those targeted measures in China include extending large state loans to companies to keep them afloat. Tonight, the government here said they are well prepared for any effect coronavirus may have on the UK economy. Investors appear less confident, though, and neither have a crystal ball.
Well, the first British death, the first cases in Northern Ireland and Wales. Boris Johnson has said tonight that coronavirus is the government's top priority. He said he'd discussed the UK's preparedness with the Health Secretary and the Chief Medical Officer, but he won't be chairing an emergency COBRA meeting until Monday. The reach of the virus is spreading fast, with nearly 60 countries reporting cases. The World Health Organization says it could reach most, if not all, countries. Today, Nigeria, New Zealand, Lithuania, Mexico and Iceland all reported their first cases. Now, most of the people who have died of the infection have been in mainland China, with nearly 3,000 deaths. Outside China, Iran, South Korea and Italy have had the most victims. Here, 20 people have now been diagnosed with the illness, 4 more in the past 24 hours. Here's our health correspondent, Victoria MacDonald.
In the aftermath of the coronavirus epidemic, whenever that is, experts will look to what happened on the Diamond Princess cruise ship and ask what lessons could be learned. So far, 6 people who were on board have died, including 1 Briton who has not yet been named, while more than 700 passengers and crew contracted COVID-19. There have been scathing reports about the quarantine measures, of officials sent to investigate as it was docked in Yokohama themselves falling ill, and of inadequate testing. But there will be lessons learned across the globe. Today, the World Health Organization said 49 countries have now reported cases.
Our epidemiologists have been monitoring this development continuously, and we have now increased our assessment of the risk of spread and the risk of impact of COVID-19 to very high at global level.
This is a message from the WHO that says, wake up, get ready, this virus may be on its way and you have a duty to your citizens and to the world to be ready. Perhaps a message too to Iran, where there is concern that the numbers infected and dying are far greater than officially claimed. They have now closed the parliament, and in the Shia holy city of Qom, the centre of the outbreak, they're using what one source told us were chemical defence vehicles from the Iran-Iraq war of the 1980s, this time to disinfect against this virulent virus.
Until this moment, taking into account the previous day's numbers, 388 people have been confirmed to have COVID-19 in the country. Unfortunately, 34 people have died from this disease as of today noon.
Some sources, however, have told us that the death toll is far higher. And that is worrying. Already 97 cases have been exported from Iran to 11 countries. In the UK, where 19 people have now been confirmed with the disease, there have been warnings that if the situation worsens, mass gatherings may have to be cancelled or schools closed.
In any pandemic preparation, the government has to walk a fine line between protecting the public and the social consequences. So the London Underground, for instance, it does feel sometimes like a hotbed of germs. But if you closed it down, how would NHS staff get to work?
The NHS is preparing and details are slowly being released, but in an extraordinary interview, the MP for City and Westminster today revealed that contingency plans in London include opening a morgue in Hyde Park in tents. Noticeably absent has been the Prime Minister until today, when, perhaps responding to criticism, he first called an emergency Cobra meeting, though not until Monday, and then tonight, asked about the death from the Diamond Princess, he said this.
I think it was, we were following the best medical advice, and we regret any, we very much regret the loss of life of the individual concerned, but we think that the best thing to do is not to move people around too much in the current situation, not to repatriate, unless you can be absolutely sure that there isn't going to be a spread and a contagion to this country. So that's the principle that we're adopting.
Evidence from China shows that those most at risk of dying from this virus are men over the age of 80 with pre-existing health conditions. It is also the case that 80% of people will have mild or no symptoms and can recover at home. And the hope, though increasingly fragile, is that this epidemic can still be contained.
Well, we heard about the impact that all of this is having on the markets. So joining me now from southwest London is Lord O'Neill, former chief economist with Goldman Sachs. He served as the commercial secretary to the Treasury in David Cameron's government and published a book, Superbugs: An Arms Race Against Bacteria. Lord O'Neill, global shares have had their worst week since the financial crisis. Are investors right to be scared, do you think?
Well, if they just spent the last 10 minutes listening to your discussion, as I have, I guess there are plenty of reasons to be scared. It's obviously a very troubling and complex situation. I think before I answer any more, I think it's important to remember that from a global economics perspective, this came at an extremely unfortunate time, because we were just in December, January, seeing some signs of vague stabilisation of the world economy after what had been a somewhat worrying weakening throughout 2019, with China already at the heart of that weakening, and some countries that are economically so successful at benefiting from China's rise, such as Germany here in Europe or Japan in Asia, South Korea as well, already suffering from that. So this from an economic perspective is particularly unfortunate. And of course, as I'm sure you've touched on in previous discussions, China today is 5 times the share of global GDP that it was when we had SARS 17 years ago. So
should the World Bank or the IMF step in to try and avert a global recession? And is a global recession now inevitable in your view?
So I would imagine there must have been some very interesting phone calls going on between so-called G20 Sherpas, which is the officials of the leading 20 economies around the world, about being ready to act. It's not clear to me, and I heard one of your previous speakers, it's not clear to me what cutting interest rates would do in the slightest for a situation like this, and indeed partly linked to other challenges of our time, but particularly issues to do with equality and both actual and perceptions of it. Further measures on interest rates or so-called quantitative easing, I don't think would be particularly sensible or helpful in my view.
So
Central banks providing liquidity.
But are financial leaders around the world sort of slightly powerless in the face of this rather unknown threat?
So I think they can provide a lot of liquidity to make sure financial markets function properly, and in some countries the central bank can play a role to help make sure that the lending support might be there. But I hope that this would accelerate what in some countries, including the UK, appears to be a growing recognition that they can have a more activist fiscal policy, particularly in terms of investment spending. And I think whether it be here, Germany or China, to name just three really important places, the case for having a more aggressive domestic fiscal policy response is very clear to me, and I hope that's what now happens.
So governments piling in and investing more by borrowing more?
I would say that the case for that is really strong. One of the other aspects of what's happened in the markets this week is a further dramatic drop in long-term bond yields. So governments can borrow at what are historically extraordinary low rates for a very long term into the future. And so if there were a time to do things like that, to invest in infrastructure, many of the topical things that you have on your program every other night, and other ones as well, this is a particularly opportune time to perhaps even be more ambitious about those things than they might have been thinking just 2 or 3 weeks ago, in my view.
You had your hands on the levers of power in government. From the outside now, looking in, do you think the government has a grip of this crisis? Do you think it looks like they do?
Well, it's very difficult to try and pretend to have a expert view on anything like this, particularly if you're not an infection specialist. But what I would say in their defence so far, and I look at all sorts of numbers about this every day, so far the infection rate in the UK is still very low relative to countries that we might regard as our peers. For example, in France, I think there's close to, if not more than twice as many recorded infections. Germany, even more than that. So far we seem to be doing okay, and I think, as has been discussed also earlier, where the centre of the spread here has been indicated and recognised pretty quickly. Okay. And this balance between trying to scare us all or make sure we're prepared is what they have to keep reviewing every day. And so far, I think they're doing the best they can, but it's obviously a very unpredictable and worrying time for everybody.
Lord O'Neill, thanks very much for joining us. Well, we did ask the Department of Health and Public Health England for an interview, but no one was available from either of those bodies. I have, though, been speaking to Anna Soubry, the former MP who lost her seat at the last election and was a minister in the Department of Health itself. I began by asking her about whether she was surprised that the Prime Minister hadn't yet chaired a meeting of COBRA about the coronavirus.
I wish I could say that I was surprised, but I'm afraid I think this is absolutely in the character of Boris Johnson, and I think he has a pitiful understanding of the realities of how people are looking at this problem, how they need guidance, how we need to make sure that our NHS is prepared. And he needed and should have got a grip on this, and his government should have done the same some considerable time ago.
The government says that, you know, weekly meetings of COBRA have been happening. They just haven't involved the Prime Minister, and that Public Health England is meeting with the relevant departments. So they're saying a lot is going on behind the scenes, and perhaps to do more in public would panic people, wouldn't it?
No, it's not about doing things in public, do forgive me. It's about making sure that you handle what is undoubtedly a very serious situation. COBRA is the most, as I know, because I have been involved with COBRA when I was a health minister and when I was a business minister. What it does is it brings the people that should be brought together at the most senior level. It literally either sits them around the telephone or at the same table, and it gets a grip of the situation and it sorts out the messaging. And one of the really important things in this whole circumstances is the lack of good communication with people, so that too many people are panicked, they are worried, and they need to be given good, sensible, easily accessible facts and advice. And then that begins to calm everything down at the same time as you're making sure that all the other pieces of the jigsaw that you need to get in place, the NHS, social services, all those things are being done.
Should the government have moved to repatriate the British citizens on board the Diamond Princess cruise ship earlier, do you think?
Of course he should. And what about Tenerife and what is happening there? In the area where I live, in the East Midlands, we have schools who are providing conflicting information to parents. And when people start to get that information, as they do, on the internet, through social media sites, then with all sorts of other information and misinformation, understandably, people don't know what to believe, and they are worried and they are panicked.
Anna Soubry speaking to me earlier. Well, President Trump has predicted that one day the coronavirus will disappear, claiming it's like a miracle. But other US officials have warned the country should prepare for significant disruption to everyday life. So let's go live now to our Washington correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy. Siobhan, explain, please.
Well, Kathy, you only have to look at the screens here, the red screens, to understand what's going on. Americans have clearly gone into panic mode. Investors are listening to the news of new, fresh viral outbreaks around the world, and they're listening to companies like Apple, Microsoft and Amazon, who are warning that demand is falling, that supply chains are already beginning to clog up, and that will hurt their profits. And if it does, that will affect the health not just of the US economy, Kathy, but the whole of the global economy. And that is why we're seeing the Dow Jones and other big stock markets here continuing to tumble today. They are on course, of course, for their worst weekly performance since 2008. Of course, the man who woke up this morning probably choking on his cornflakes when he saw the red screens was Donald Trump. We know that he has staked the success of his future re-election campaign on the strength, the health of the American economy. So if that begins to falter, so too could his campaign, particularly if there is a sense that he and his administration simply have not done enough to combat the threat of the virus soon as enough, which is what he's being criticised here for. That is why he has taken to Twitter today to criticise the Democrats for trying to politicise, he says, the virus story. And it's why his chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, speaking at a conference today just outside DC, tried to suggest that journalists were only covering the story of this global virus outbreak because of the damage they thought it could do to President Trump. Let's hear what he had to say.
The reason you're paying you're saying so much attention to it today is that they think this is going to be what brings down the president. That's what this is all about. I got a note today from a reporter saying, what are you going to do today to calm the markets? And I'm like, really, what I might do today to calm the markets is tell people to turn their televisions off for 24 hours.
Well, administration and he there, you could hear clearly trying to play things down, but the disease experts here are still continuing to say that a further outbreak is inevitable. As for a vaccine, scientists here are saying, yes, that the work is underway, but it will take at least a year to a year and a half, Kathy, before that vaccine will be able to be used for widespread inoculations. And that is another thing that the markets here really do not like, that there is no sense of an end to this crisis.
Siobhan, thanks very much.